Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen. All right, so today's sermon is when right goes wrong. I like that sign. Good job, Ron.
Thank you.
For the record, she gets to pick all of these.
Yeah.
I don't do that. I just give her the title and she picks these. She does a great job, doesn't she?
It's not always easy.
But when right goes wrong, let's start by looking at just kind of a passage to set the stage for this. Matthew chapter 5, verse 11 and 12 says, "Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you." We're going to be persecuted, Christians, for Christ's sake. And what does God want us to do about it? Be glad. How are we supposed to do that? We're supposed to be glad when these things are happening to us. Now that's a hard lesson for us. That's not quite the thrust of this, but boy, what an amazing point. God wants us to be able to take it when things go wrong because we're doing right, which they will go wrong when we're doing right. He wants us to rejoice in him, to be thankful for it, and not lose faith through it. Which brings us to our actual passage today that we're going to study. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 39 and look at one of the stories of Joseph. Now, for those of you who maybe don't know who Joseph is, Joseph was one of the children of Israel. And we're picking up in chapter 39. A lot's happened to him going before this. One of his things is he was one of the 12 children of Israel, and his brothers sold them out into slavery because they were jealous of him. All he did was serve God. He loved the Lord, and his brothers sold him into slavery. Now, there's a family with some problems. You think you have problems with your siblings? That takes it to a whole new level, folks. And so we see this story unfold that here Joseph is. An interesting thing about Joseph. Joseph in the Bible is actually kind of a picture of the coming Christ. One of the things that's unique about Joseph, of main characters in the Bible, is there's not a single sin ever recorded to the man Joseph, which is very unusual. Because the Bible has no problem recording sins in the prophets, in Moses, in Noah, and all these faithful men. The Bible never had a problem recording sins done by his servants. But he never recorded a sin that Joseph committed. Now, we can know Joseph did commit sins, but the Bible never recorded it for us. Because God wanted to show us a picture of the coming Christ. And Joseph's life, when you start bringing it down, has a lot of parallels, a lot of things that Joseph was. Starting with him being cast out of the children of Israel and being rejected by them. So we pick up his story. He's now been sold into slavery in chapter 39. And we're going to read through this entire chapter so we can actually see the context of it. And you can make sure I don't say something, pull something out of it incorrectly. So let's just go through and we'll stop along the way and look at some things. So starting in verse 1, "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither." So Joseph was sold in slavery. Potiphar's the one who ended up buying him. "And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him and made him overseer over his house and all that he had put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not what he had, save the bread he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. So Joseph comes into this man's house. This guy buys this slave, just this random slave. And it turns out this slave's a pretty good guy. He's like, man, boy, did I luck out. I mean, talk about the luckiest man in the Bible right there is Potiphar in many respects. Here he was. This guy got sold into slavery by his brothers, and instead of griping about it and being a terrible slave, he went in there and served. And he served well. He served his master, his new master, faithfully. And this had to be weird. Because someone who just got sold into slavery, you're not going to serve well. You're going to have some attitude. Why am I here? This isn't right. Joseph was never like that. At least not that we know of. Now, of course, it didn't happen all at once, but Potiphar started putting Joseph to work, and Joseph did a great job, and he started talking to him, and started working, and go, wow, this guy's pretty good. And over time, he built his trust, because not to betray, but because he was being faithful. Not for his sake, not for his master's sake, but he was being faithful for God's sake. He was being a servant of God and doing that which was put before him. He had no idea what was coming, but yet he said, you know what, Lord? You're in charge of all this. You helped arrange this somehow. You're the God of the flood who brought out Noah. You're the God of Abraham who slayed kingdoms. I can trust you have a plan for me, though I don't know what it is. And so he served God by serving man faithfully. And after a period of time, we don't know how long, but he did such a good job, Potiphar said, I'm putting you in charge of my entire house. I'm putting you in charge of everything I own. Imagine that. I mean, this guy who he bought, this guy, everything he touched turned to gold because it was blessed by God. So the things he did, boy, he'd be going, hey, did you do that task I told you? Yeah, it's done. Well, how much money did we make? Well, we made an extra $10,000. Boy, that's the third time this month you made me $10,000. To put it into today's term, how'd you make it? I didn't expect to make but maybe 2 or 3. Yeah, and you made 10? How did you do that? Potiphar was just beside him. Who is this guy? Oh, well, I serve God and he blesses me, sir. Wow. Well, you know, that truly must be right. Because look at everything you touch does well. Because you're doing things well. And so, after a while, he says, okay, I'm putting you in charge of my house. And that keeps going well, and it's like, boy, I'm to the point where I don't even know. I put my entire financial affairs into your hand. Hey, Joseph, how rich am I? You're super rich, dude. Oh, great. Hey, Joseph, can I afford to do this? Yeah, you can do that 10 times over and it won't even make a dent. Oh, great, let's do this. He got to the point he didn't even know how much money he had. He just turned it over to Joseph. He was so trusted because he served God and did what was right time after time. He just turned out, hey, Joseph, how am I doing? Things are still going great. All right, that's all I need to know. Any problems? Hey, Joseph, checking in with you today. Any problems I need to know about today? Not a one, sir. Hey, keep up the good work. And off you went. What an amazing situation that Joseph was in. Here he was, got sold into slavery, and now, and we'll find out here in a little bit, he's now got the rule of the house. Everything but the master himself. Anything he wants. All the food, all the clothing, all of his needs are met as well as any person can ever be expected. He's living as good as anybody ever can at that point. And it's all because Joseph served the Lord. And he did it faithfully. And so he's doing right. And now something's about to go wrong. So, we see in verse 7, and this is going to get interesting because there's a lot of things to say about what's coming up. Verse 7, let's read down through this a little ways. And it came to pass after these things, okay, so Joseph's in charge, that the master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." Okay. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, "Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath into my hand. There is none greater in this house than I am. Neither have he kept back anything from me, but thee, but you. Because thou art his wife, then how can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And it came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie with her or to be with her. So day after day, and he kept saying no. Verse 11, and it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into his house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. So again, did the right thing. Verse 13. But it goes wrong. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called upon the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, "See, he hath brought in a Hebrew into us to mock us, and came unto me, lie with me. And I cried out with a loud voice. And it came to pass when I heard him, lifted up my voice and cried, and he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, I lifted up my voice and cried, and he left his garment with me and fled out. And then it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, and his wrath was kindled. Okay, a lot just happened right there. So, Joseph was there in the house, going about his business. And he started working with the master's wife. And somewhere along the lines, the master's wife would, "Hey!" First thing I want to say here is, ladies and gentlemen, be careful about friends of the opposite sex. Be very careful about spending too much time with someone who isn't your spouse. I'm not saying don't have friends who aren't the opposite sex. I'm not saying you can never talk to people who aren't your spouse. But you need to be careful. Because attraction is a funny thing. You can take somebody who you weren't really looking at and then one day go, "Hey!" You know, I joke with my wife because when I really saw this for on a new level, I was deployed to South Korea without my family for a year. And I got talking to one of our majors, and we started having this conversation over there. And it's like after a certain period of time, people who you're not really looking at all of a sudden they suddenly look better. They look a little bit better. And so it became a joke. I told my wife, and we talked about this, it became kind of a joke is, so how good looking is somebody? Are they 3 months Korea good looking? Are they 6 months Korea good looking? Or are they 9 months Korea good looking? Because at some point, they start looking pretty good. And so that kind of became a joke on how to measure attractiveness. But at the same time, it's true. You spend enough time with somebody, especially absence of the one who you should be spending time with, they're going to start looking good. There's a very real practical lesson for us in our lives with our spouses. There's also a spiritual lesson there for us with God right there. If you're not spending time with God like you should, the devil's going to start looking pretty good. Think about that. Just like we have the physical attraction, we have a spiritual attraction that we need to foster. And the devil looks pretty good, but he's not good for you. Remember, he was an angel of light, so he's beautiful. So that's one thing to look at with this passage. Another thing we got to look at with this passage is we got to look at, let's start with, today we have this whole Me Too movement and Believe All Women movement. Sorry, the Believe All Women movement is unbiblical. And here's the passage to prove it. You cannot believe, no more than you can believe all men, you can't believe all women. Because you know what? They lie.
No.
We were talking about that in Sunday school. Our Sunday school lesson today was about lies. And you know what? We lie as people. Believe all any. Probably a bad statement. Unless it's believe all things God said. Outside of that, the word all becomes a very dangerous word. You can't believe all women. You can't believe all men. You shouldn't believe them. There needs to be what's called a burden of proof. And that needs to be exhibited here. Because here, the only piece of evidence was Joseph left his garment behind. He's in and out of that house every day. That anybody could have slipped out. Because here she was, when that happened, she grabbed him at some point and tried to coerce him, and he slipped off his coat and took off.
Not like that.
Took it off. But here he was. He weaseled out of his jacket and took off. And so the only evidence was that his jacket was left behind. That's not much. But here he was. He went through that. And yet, even back then, believe the woman over the man? Because here's the thing. You know, I got to say this, guys. We kind of build our own trap. Us guys, we're not known for being very virtuous, are we? We're not known for maintaining our purity very well, are we? This goes into the next point here that I have today. But men, we kind of have a reputation for being very willing to be with a woman. Period. And you know what? That's really unfortunate. And that reputation for manhood did not serve Joseph well right here. And it's one that comes out even to today. In fact, one of the things I do, right, wrong, or indifferent, I pay attention to what's going on in modern culture right now, like dating. I got kids coming up in it, but then I also need to understand what the people who are going to be witnessing, what they're being exposed to. So I pay attention to that, and I can tell you right now, the mainstream idea of how guys would advise that situation to Joseph and give him advice would be like, yeah, dude, what you should do is you should go ahead and hop in the sack with her, and then after you hop in the sack with her, go to Potiphar and say, hey, bro, I got to tell you about your wife and what she's doing. She's not faithful to you, and I know that because, I was just with her. That's the type of advice the world gives today. And you think I'm making something up there? I've watched some of these programs that have said essentially that kind of advice. I'm not making that up. That's the sort of thing that's coming out today. That's the world's advice. Because there is something that even back then didn't have merit and wasn't lifted up. And it's something that is totally lost in conversation today. See, a lot of these modern stuff, they'll actually talk about the virtue of women and the importance of girls being pure in relationships. No one ever talks about the value of male purity and male virtue. I was actually talking to my son about this last night. I will argue it is more important for a man to be virtuous than a woman. And yet, our world today, they put no value on men's virtue. The reason I say that isn't because men sin or less or more than women sin. It's not about the sin nature. It's about the role we play. Because men, we are supposed to be leaders. We are supposed to be the ones who lead the home, who lead the people, who lead the world. We're supposed to do that. I'm not saying, again, ladies, you can be in leadership positions. I'm not saying you can't. What I'm saying is it's men who are supposed to be there. And let's be honest for a second, ladies, if all the men of the world led like they were supposed to, would any of you need to be leaders at that point?
No, I don't know.
No, you wouldn't. If all the men did our job like we're supposed to. But here's the thing. The virtuous man who actually holds on to his virtue is one of the most powerful, most capable individuals that exist. Where do I get that? This story. This story proves my point. Because who was more capable than Joseph? Joseph was the epitome of moral virtue in human men. He maintained his purity. He maintained his virtue. He maintained his status before God as a God-fearing man. And what was he able to do? Not only was he able to raise Potiphar's house to get it blessed, later on we find out he went on to save the entire country of Egypt and set up Israel. That actually saved the known world at the time because of Joseph. So when I say there's nothing more powerful than a man who maintains his virtue, I'm not just kidding or trying to say some hyperbole. I mean that literally. Our virtue is insanely important. We need to hold on to that godliness. We need to hold on and be lifted up and to lift others up. Because that's what we're to do as Christians. And here Joseph was. He maintained his virtue through accusation, through wrongful accusation, through being accused of raping a woman. Here he was being accused of that. And he never faltered his walk with the Lord. So let's see what happened next. Verse 20. And Joseph's master took him. Before I finish that verse, I got to make one little observation here. Joseph's anger was, or not just Potiphar's anger was kindled. It doesn't actually say against Joseph. I don't know exactly what was going on at the time. But maybe one of the ways this went down, which we can speculate here, maybe one of the ways this went down was Potiphar actually believed Joseph, and he was angry with his wife. But the politics of Egypt at the time put him where he was in a no-win situation. Because politics being what politics are, even to this day, something like this can get real ugly. And so for Potiphar to maintain his position, to maintain his status, to maintain his role, went along with it, knowing what his wife was costing him, the best servant he ever had. That's one possibility. Maybe he just believed his wife straight up and didn't trust Joseph. And maybe that's what happened. He said, she said, yes. Also, something else I wanted to point out, though, is when it comes time for her perspective on this, Potiphar's wife, is talk about a range of emotions in the situation. Let's just take a moment to dive down that for a second. Here she was, she had her moment where she kind of saw Joseph. And again, I wasn't there, so I don't know this is what went on. It's a few possibilities, but she looked at Joseph and she made her advance. Here she is, again, here she is as a powerful, rich, wonderful, probably beautiful woman. And here's the guy, saying no to her. That's a hard thing for a lot of ladies, especially we fast forward to today. That's a really difficult thing in our society now. We've kind of lifted ladies up to where they have a lot of power and control in relationships. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it's just the way it is. And so for a guy to reject her, here I am, this beautiful, stunning, amazing, rich woman, and you're rejecting me? That's rough. But yet also, though, so he became the object of desire is one possibility. It's like, now I got a challenge. Now I want to rope him in. Now, boy, that made her want him even more. That's one possibility. But then there's the other possibility of, and maybe they're both true, is I just made a pass at him and he refused. He's got dirt on me now. He now knows what I am. And so she becomes more insistent on him coming in with her, because if she can get him to lie with her, now she's got the same dirt on him. See, the thing about sin is it never satisfied staying by itself. It always wants to rope more in. It always wants to suck you in. And so her sin wants to, and the worst person in existence to a sinner is the person who is virtuous. Because the more virtuous somebody is, the more their sin looks ugly. And so you have a situation where now she is desperately trying to suck him in to become one of the sinners like she is. And he refuses. Folks, when it comes to sinners, when they turn over to this type of sin, there's nothing that will infuriate them more than you refusing to join them. Refusing to join them in their sin will immediately put a target on your back. They don't like that. And so that's exactly what happened here. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know all the perspectives, but boy, these are a couple of them that stand out to me in this. And so she went in and did what she did, because the more she insisted, the more he withstood. The more now there was a problem, because the more she was revealing what she was. And now he was a threat to her power and her position because of that. Politics really do stink everywhere, just for the record. Because now politics he's a threat to my power and my position. Yeah, he was, because he now knew what you were. And you were still trying to hide it and pretend you weren't. So, verse 20, Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. Whatsoever they did, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So Joseph, no good deed goes unpunished. He's serving this guy, making him a fortune, and he goes to prison for it. And so what does Joseph do? Oh, Lord, how dare you? What could you possibly have done? Why did you bring me here? No. He said, you know what? God, you put me here. You are the God of Abraham. You are the God of Noah. You are the God of Adam. You brought us through all of these things. You can bring me through this. And he said, you know what, God? I'm still going to serve you. He didn't let what was wrong stop him from being the virtuous man he was. He stayed faithful to God. And so what did he do? He started serving in the prison and raise up, just like he did with Potiphar. The same exact thing he did with Potiphar, he did in the prison. Potiphar rose him up to become chief over all. He rose up to become chief over the whole prison. Here he was a prisoner, and yet he was running the place. The warden would come in and be like, hey, how's things going? Everything's A-okay. All the prisoners are fair. All the prisoners are taken care of. We got this, we got that, we got that. And he's like, all right, do I need to do anything? Nope, I got it. You go sit and rest, chief. The prison ran smoothly under this guy. He did the exact same thing. He served not for the prison's sake, not for the guard's sake, not for the warden's sake, but for God's sake. He served God with what was before him. Would any of us keep that kind of attitude and faithfulness to the Lord? Man, we go to the grocery store and there's a line too long and we start griping and complaining. We can't even keep our patience at the grocery store line. And I'm right there with you. I mean, there's a few things you see. 12 lines, 8 of them are closed, and there's 20 people deep, and there's only 4 checkers, and you start griping, and I'm right there with you.
Oh, you must have been a saver.
So I get it. None of us have that kind of wherewithal with the Lord, but we should. We should have that kind of relationship with the Lord. That kind of faith in the Lord to take us through whatever comes our way. To be able to say, Lord, you brought us here. Look at what horrors I'm going through. Lord, you know, you brought me here. But you know what? You brought me here for something. You brought me here for a reason. I don't know what it is yet. But I'm going to stay faithful to you no matter what the problems are. Philippians 4:11. Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Joseph was thrown in prison Do you think he wanted to be in prison? No. Do you think he wanted to be a slave? No. But he stayed content. Lord, this is where you have me. This is what you have me to do. I'm going to do it. All right. I don't understand, Lord, but I understand you. I don't understand this situation, but I understand you. Lord, let me stay faithful. And he stayed content in his relationship with God. 2 Peter 3:9. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering, us a word, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. This is a great example. Man's logic says a good, faithful God would not allow his servant, his faithful follower, to ever go to prison like that. That's man's wisdom. Proof that's wrong wisdom. God's faithfulness says, you're a good, faithful man of God. You go to prison, and I'll be with you. You stay faithful through prison, and I'll bless you. I'm going to take care of you no matter what those problems are. I'm going to be there with you. That's God's faithfulness. God never promises the problems aren't coming. He promises help through them. We can take that to our lives today. Lord, why did you let this thing happen? Oh, a tree fell on my fence, and now I have to replace my fence and spend $500 on repairs, whatever it might be. Lord, how could you let this happen? Aren't you faithful, Lord? I've been tithing and giving to the church, and now I have to spend this money. You can fill in the scenario in a million different ways. It all comes back to the same thing. Lord, you're not faithful. No. I am faithful. I'm going to faithfully make sure there's a way through this scenario. If you stay close to me, if you stay faithful to me, I will be with you every step along the way. And I'm going to help you through this. Oh, you don't have any money? You know what? I have solutions for that. If you stay faithful for me. And it might not just be giving you more money. There's other ways God has. Because he knows what you actually need. Because at the end of the day, something Joseph understood, that it took us thousands of years later before it was written down, is Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. All the bad stuff that happens in your life, all those challenges, all those problems. Lord, how is it you let me have cancer? I don't know why God gave some of you cancer. I don't know why he gave you other diseases and other problems. God doesn't promise he's not going to give you those things. He promises he will help you through them. And he promises that there is a reason that one day you'll be able to look and go, oh, that's why. Thank you for putting me through that, Lord. Thank you for putting me through that horrible thing, because now I see what it was in truth, with open eyes that I couldn't see before. The question is in the meantime, will you stay faithful to him? Because we see Joseph concluding his story saying this in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Folks, things are going to go wrong. Even when you're doing right. There are few things in this world I can promise you from the Bible, and that things are going to go wrong is one of them. Somehow, somewhere, something bad's going to happen to you in some capacity. But God meant it for good. God's going to use it for good. It's going to be a good thing. Now, is it going to be a thing that grows you and makes you stronger in your relationship with Him or tears you down? That's up to you. That's up to you on whether or not you stay faithful to Him. Now you say, I want to. He'll help you. He doesn't expect you to do it on your own. But if when those bad things come, you walk away from God, He's going to let you walk away. He's going to let you walk away. God does not force anybody to serve Him. But He provides a way to serve Him. The choice, though, is going to be yours. The relationship you build with Christ and with God is going to be yours. So when you're doing right and things go wrong, don't be surprised. Don't call out to God, God, how could you allow this? He allowed one of the most faithful people of the Bible to be thrown into prison over a false accusation that was ridiculous. At this point, let's be real for a second. At this point, Joseph was so rich and powerful, if he wanted a girl, he probably could have gotten that. I mean, let's just be real there. I mean, if he was so inclined, why would he have done that? He wouldn't have needed to. He wouldn't have needed to. And yet, he got thrown into prison for it. For this crime he didn't commit. And then he served in prison and said, Lord, here I am. I don't know. This evil has come upon me. I don't know what you're doing with it. But I trust you. And God blessed him. And for those of you who know the rest of the story, boy, did God bless him ever. Because not only did he do that in prison, he then took him from prison and had him go to become Pharaoh's top guy and save the known world at that time. All of Egypt and areas way beyond Egypt because of him. God had a plan, and he has a plan for you if you stay faithful. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so very much.